Camp Concordia, July 1945. The summer sun cast a relentless shimmer over the prisoner compound as Oberfeldwebel Ingrid Bauer watched American sentries preparing what seemed the most outlandish feast she'd encountered since her capture a month ago. On wide outdoor grills, they were charring whole ears of corn still cloaked in their husks, tending to the golden kernels with the reverence Germans reserved for choice cuts of beef. "They're grilling corn," she remarked to Clara Voss, a former Luftwaffe cipher clerk standing beside her at the barracks window. "Look at them treating corn like it's a gourmet dish instead of animal feed." Clara's chuckle carried a nervous edge. Everything about their American captivity had contradicted Wehrmacht propaganda about enemy cruelty. The immaculate quarters, generous rations, and courteous demeanor all pointed to a prosperity Berlin's briefings had never admitted. Yet this corn ritual seemed to confirm their assumptions about American culinary ignorance. "In Germany," Ingrid continued, "we feed corn to livestock. Only the desperate ate it during the worst shortages, and we milled it into flour to mask its flavor." Through the window, they saw Sergeant Thompson instructing a group of curious prisoners who'd volunteered for kitchen duty. He rotated the corn with precision, explaining something in halting German as the husks darkened and steam curled from the kernels within. "Miss Bauer, Miss Voss," called Corporal Emily Harper from the doorway. "You're invited to our monthly cultural exchange supper. Tonight's theme is American summer harvest traditions. It's optional, but the kitchen crew has prepared something extraordinary. Will there be proper food?" Ingrid asked, her skepticism undisguised. "Or just more corn dressed up as cuisine?" Harper's face remained composed, though her eyes hinted at familiarity with such remark. "You'll have to judge for yourselves. Supper's at 6 Gauer in the recreation hall." After Harper departed, Clara turned to Ingrid with unease. "Should we go? I don't want to insult them, but I'm not eating corn just to be polite." "We'll attend," Ingrid decided, "if only to document what other strange American food habits we can share when we're repatriated. Grilled corn served to humans. Our kin will think it's absurd." That evening, 40 German women prisoners gathered in the recreation hall, where American staff had staged an elaborate outdoor cooking display. The grills glowed with heat, and the scent of roasting corn filled the air. Not the stale odor Ingrid linked to barn feed, but something sweeter, almost toasty. "Ladies," announced Sergeant Thompson in measured German, "tonight we share an American custom. Sweet corn, harvested fresh from Kansas fields, grilled with butter and a pinch of salt. This is summer fare here. Family feasts, community gatherings, pure delight." Ingrid exchanged glances with other prisoners, all sharing the same thought. Americans celebrated by eating corn. The idea seemed to reinforce everything they'd been taught about the chasm between refined European cuisine and crude American tastes. But then Thompson lifted a perfectly charred ear from the flames, peeled back the blackened husk to reveal golden kernels gleaming with butter, and the fragrance that wafted forth stirred an unexpected hunger in Ingrid, despite her mental scorn. "Who'd like to try first?" Thompson asked, extending the steaming corn. The German women stared at the offered food, torn between ingrained bias and curiosity about whether Americans could truly mean to eat something they'd always deemed fit only for animals. Ingrid had been reluctantly chosen, or rather, nudged forward by her peers as the senior officer to test potentially hazardous American fare first. She stood before Sergeant Thompson, eyeing the grilled corn with the caution she'd reserved for an unexploded shell. "Just bite the kernels straight off the cob," Thompson directed, demonstrating with his own ear. "The butter and salt amplify its natural sweetness." "Sweetness?" Ingrid echoed. "Corn isn't sweet. It's bland, starchy animal feed." "Field corn is," Thompson conceded, his patient tone suggesting he'd had this exchange before. "That's for livestock. But this is sweet corn, a variety bred for human enjoyment. Americans have perfected it for over a century." The distinction meant little to Ingrid, who'd never imagined corn could have types beyond the coarse kind used for fodder in Germany. She took the offered ear, warm from the grill, butter trickling in golden streams. "For the fatherland," she muttered wryly, then bit into the corn with a resigned air of one performing an unpleasant duty. The burst of flavor was utterly unexpected. Sweet, undeniably sweet, like ripe summer fruit, yet also rich, faintly smoky from the grill. with a tender texture unlike the tough, starchy consistency she associated with animal feed. The salt amplified the corn's natural taste, creating a combination her palate had never encountered. She chewed slowly, aware that every prisoner was watching her reaction. Her face must have betrayed her surprise, for Clara stepped forward at once. "That good?" Clara asked, her tone skeptical. "It's..." Ingrid searched for words. "It's not what I expected. It's actually enjoyable." "Enjoyable?" Clara seized an ear from Thompson's tray, bit into it with evident doubt, and her eyes widened in the same shock Ingrid had felt. "My God, this tastes nothing like the corn we fed to pigs." Within minutes, all 40 prisoners were eating grilled corn, their reactions ranging from astonishment to delight. The hall filled with the sounds of kernels being bitten from cobs, murmurs of discovery, and bewildered discussions about how Americans had turned corn into genuinely delicious fare. Before we explore how this simple corn revelation reshaped everything these German prisoners believed about American cuisine and culture, tell us where you're joining us from around the globe. We love connecting with our worldwide audience as we delve into these remarkable stories of culinary bias meeting tasty reality. Drop your location below. After her second ear, Ingrid approached Sergeant Thompson. "How is this possible? How did you make corn taste like this?" "We didn't make it taste like anything," Thompson replied. "This is how sweet corn naturally tastes when fresh, properly cooked, and treated as food rather than dismissed as animal feed. Americans have savored it this way since before our nation was founded." "But in Germany," Ingrid began. "In Germany, you only know field corn," Thompson interrupted gently. "The kind bred for meal, flour, and fodder. You've never tasted sweet corn because you never developed the varieties or culinary traditions for it." The comment stung more than Ingrid cared to admit. How many other foods, customs, and possibilities had Germany overlooked without proper exploration? The corn experience sparked weeks of fervent debate among the prisoners about cuisine, culture, and the assumptions they'd brought into captivity. Ingrid was assigned to the camp garden, where American staff taught prisoners about diverse crop varieties and farming methods prioritizing quality over mere sustenance. "This plot grows 3 corn types," explained Corporal Jensen, guiding Ingrid and 5 others through the garden. "Field corn for fodder and flour, sweet corn for eating fresh, and popcorn, a snack food Americans love." "Snack food?" Ingrid questioned. "You breed a corn just for snacking?" "We have dozens of varieties for different uses," Jensen corrected. "Americans take corn seriously. It's a native crop we've refined for millennia. What you know as corn is just a fragment of its story." As they toured the garden, Jensen detailed the differences. Field corn with its tough, starchy kernels for milling. Sweet corn with higher sugars and tender texture for eating fresh. Popcorn with a unique structure that bursts when heated. Each type reflected an agricultural sophistication Germany had never pursued, having dismissed corn as inferior to wheat or potatoes. "In Germany," Ingrid admitted, "we saw corn as a last resort, something Americans ate because they lacked proper European crops." Yet, Jensen replied without judgment, "Corn is one of the most efficient crops ever developed. Higher yields than wheat, more versatile uses, better drought tolerance. Americans chose corn not for lack of European options, but because we saw its potential." That evening, during kitchen duty, Ingrid worked with Sergeant Larson, learning American cooking methods. They prepared corn in various styles: grilled, boiled, sliced from the cob, and sautéed with butter, even baked into breads and muffins. Each method revealed the crop's versatility. "My great-aunt was German," Larson shared while showing Ingrid how to cut kernels cleanly. "She arrived in 1890 and refused corn at first, calling it unfit for humans." "What changed her mind?" Ingrid asked. "A harvest festival," Larson said. "Everyone was eating corn on the cob, and the smell was irresistible. She tried it, and soon she was baking cornbread weekly and growing sweet corn. She said it taught her never to judge food by prejudice. You have to taste it with an open mind." The story echoed Ingrid's own experience. She'd scoffed at the grilled corn based on German assumptions, never considering that different varieties or methods could yield such different results. "Sergeant Larson," she ventured, "how much else have we Germans misjudged? How many things did we dismiss without truly exploring?" Larson paused, considering her question. "That's for you to discover, Miss Bauer. But I'll say this. The societies that thrive are those willing to learn from others, not those assuming they already know it all. In the weeks that followed, Ingrid grew captivated by America's corn culture. She learned of Native American traditions that had cultivated countless corn varieties over centuries. She discovered that America's economic might was partly rooted in corn's versatility, not just as food, but as livestock feed, raw material for products, and even fuel. Corn isn't merely a crop here, she told fellow prisoners during evening discussions. It's a cornerstone of their agricultural and industrial systems. We scorned it as animal feed while they built an empire around it. Are you suggesting we should have eaten more corn? Clara teased lightly. I'm saying, Ingrid replied thoughtfully, we shouldn't have assumed American food choices stemmed from ignorance rather than advanced agricultural innovation. We were mistaken. August brought harvest season and an unexpected opportunity. German prisoners were invited to work on Kansas farms, aiding local families with corn harvests, while learning techniques applicable to Germany's post-war rebuilding. This is a rare chance, Sergeant Thompson explained during the assignment briefing. Kansas farmers need hands for the harvest, and you need practical farming knowledge. The host families are German-American and specifically requested prisoners eager to learn about corn cultivation. Ingrid volunteered at once, joined by 18 others intrigued by the crop they'd recently mocked. 2 days later, she rode in a truck to the Muller farm, 25 miles from camp, for a 2-week immersion in American farming. The Mullers, descendants of German immigrants who settled Kansas in the 1860s, greeted the prisoners with a warmth that startled Ingrid. Mrs. Muller spoke German with an American twang, but her hospitality was distinctly Teutonic. Coffee and fresh cornbread ready, guest rooms prepared, treatment befitting workers, not captive. My great-grandfather came from Saxony, Mrs. Muller shared during their first evening meal, where sweet corn starred alongside other dishes. He refused corn for his first year here, calling it beneath German standards. But he learned American corn was different and grew to love it. That's a recurring tale, Ingrid noted, accepting her third ear of grilled corn despite vowing restraint. Because it's true, Mr. Muller added. Europeans arrived with biases, but those who thrived embraced this land's offerings instead of clinging to old-world notions. The next morning, Ingrid's farming education began in earnest. The Muller cornfield spanned hundreds of acres, organized with a precision surpassing anything she'd seen in Germany. Mechanical harvesters glided through rows, gathering ears efficiently as Mr. Muller explained the varieties. This patch is field corn for fodder and industry, he indicated, pointing to dense, hard kernels. That's sweet corn for eating fresh. The distant field is popcorn. Each type demands specific growing conditions and harvest timing. In Germany, Ingrid said, we plant whatever corn grows and use it as needed. We can't afford specialized varieties. That's not indulgence, Mr. Mueller corrected gently. It's efficiency. Specialized varieties yield better results for each purpose. Field corn gives more starch per acre. Sweet corn offers better taste and nutrition. Growing both optimally meets our needs better than forcing one type to do it all. As the day progressed, Ingrid learned about crop rotation to maintain soil health, irrigation systems maximizing yields, machinery reducing labor, and storage methods preventing spoilage. Each lesson revealed a sophistication, explaining America's agricultural abundance. You feed your people better than we do, Ingrid said during a lunch break, eating a sandwich with fresh corn kernels. Not because your land is better, but because your systems are. Perhaps, Mrs. Muller replied diplomatically. Or maybe we asked different questions. Instead of forcing people to eat what's available, we asked how to grow crops they'd want to eat. Corn's a prime example. We turned something Europeans dismissed into a culinary foundation. That evening, weary from harvest work, but mentally invigorated, Ingrid sat on the Mueller porch, watching the sunset over cornfields embodying American agricultural philosophy, specialized crops for distinct purposes, mechanical efficiency, quality alongside quantity, and respect for food as something to refine, not just tolerate. Ready for tomorrow? Mr. Mueller asked, offering her lemonade. Ready to learn more? Ingrid replied. Each day here upends something I thought I knew about farming, food, or efficiency. The 2-week placement transformed Ingrid's understanding of corn and American agricultural ethos. On her final evening, The Muellers hosted a traditional corn roast, inviting neighbors to celebrate the harvest and give prisoners an authentic cultural experience. "This is how Americans mark the corn harvest," Mrs. Mueller explained, preparing dozens of ears for the grills. "It's not high cuisine. It's communal food, shared joy, a nod to a bountiful season." As dusk fell over Kansas fields, Ingrid watched families gather around grills, children darting between tables, adults swapping tales of the season's triumphs and trials. The scene mirrored German harvest festivals, yet differed in one key way. Americans celebrated abundance, not just relief from scarcity. "Miss Bauer," Mr. Mueller called, "care to help show your fellow prisoners how to grill corn properly? You've become quite skilled." Surprised, Ingrid joined him, demonstrating techniques she'd learned. Judging doneness by husk color, timing butter application, balancing salt to enhance sweetness. 2 weeks ago, a prisoner noted, "You mocked corn as animal feed. Now you're teaching us to cook it." 2 weeks ago, Ingrid replied candidly, "I was ignorant about corn and American food culture. I assumed if Germans didn't eat it, it was inferior, not something we'd never developed." As the evening unfolded, prisoners' skepticism gave way to appreciation. Even those who deemed American food crude admitted grilled sweet corn was delicious. "I don't get it," Clara said, finishing her 4th ear. "Why didn't Germany develop corn like this? Why only field corn?" "Because," Ingrid answered, drawing on her farm lessons, "we assumed corn was lesser than wheat or potatoes. We never invested in it, having decided it wasn't worth it. Americans started with different assumptions and got different results. The insight extended beyond corn. Over months in captivity, Ingrid had seen German assumptions about American inferiority disproved: flush toilets, ice cream, automotive abundance, and now agricultural prowess turning corn into cuisine. Each challenged her view of which society was truly advanced. "When we return to Germany," she told the prisoners quietly, "we must share the truth about what we've seen, not propaganda of American weakness, but their strengths, including corn." The remark drew chuckles, but Ingrid was earnest. Germany's rebuilding needed accurate insights into America's success, even if they came in humble forms like corn. As the roast ended, Mrs. Mueller handed Ingrid a packet. "Sweet corn seeds," she said, "for your garden in Germany post-war. Share what you've learned." Ingrid accepted with unexpected emotion. A simple gift, seeds for German soil, symbolizing lessons about prejudice, assumptions, and experiencing things directly. "Thank you," she said. "I'll plant these and remember the sweetest lessons come from tasting what we once dismissed." September 1945 brought cooler air, and Ingrid's new role in the camp kitchen, teaching German prisoners American corn recipes. The task felt surreal. A former Wehrmacht officer leading cooking classes for captives using a crop she'd derided months earlier. "Today, we'll make cornbread," she told a dozen wary prisoners, doubting the need to learn about corn. "It's a staple in America, especially the South," showing how corn becomes a true baked good. "Bread from cornmeal?" asked Greta Hahn, a former clerk from Bremen. "That sounds like famine food. Real bread is wheat." Ingrid recognized her own former bias. "I thought so too," she admitted. "But American cornbread isn't lesser than wheat bread. It's a distinct food with unique texture and flavor." Under Corporal Harper's oversight, she showed the process: stone-ground cornmeal mixed with flour, eggs, milk, butter, a touch of sugar, and baking powder. The batter, unlike German bread dough, drew skeptical looks as Ingrid poured it into hot cast-iron skillets. "The trick is the skillet," she explained, echoing Mrs. Muller's calm style. "Heated cast iron gives a crisp crust and moist interior. It's not mimicking wheat bread. It's different and delicious." As the cornbread baked, its aroma, sweet, buttery, unlike the musty corn scent they knew, filled the kitchen. When Ingrid removed golden rounds and cut wedges, even the most doubtful prisoners leaned in. "Try it with butter and honey," she suggested, showing the American way. "That's how farm families eat it." Opinions shifted fast. Within minutes, prisoners who'd sworn off corn-based food were asking for seconds, requesting recipes for post-war families, and discussing German adaptations. "This upends all I thought about corn," Greta admitted on her 3rd piece. "If we'd known it could taste like this, we might have developed better varieties instead of dismissing it. That's the lesson," Ingrid replied. We rejected corn without exploring its potential. Americans spent centuries crafting varieties and methods, respecting it rather than scorning it. Her classes soon covered other corn dishes: succotash with beans, corn chowder, corn pudding, even corn ice cream, which prisoners initially doubted was edible. Each recipe showcased a crop Germany had deemed only for livestock. "You're quite the corn advocate," Sergeant Thompson noted during a class on corn fritters. "Months ago you called it animal feed." "Months ago I was uninformed," Ingrid replied without shame. "Now I see corn's quality depends on the varieties developed and the respect shown in cooking. Americans excel at both." The admission came easily now. Months of captivity had shown that recognizing American strengths didn't diminish German identity. It acknowledged reality. America's agricultural approach had achieved what Germany's hadn't. By November, news of Germany's surrender and the war's end shifted focus to repatriation. For Ingrid, the military defeat mirrored her personal shift. Just as Germany had misjudged American power, she'd misjudged their food culture, assuming sophistication meant complexity, not the mastery of simple things. "Miss Bauer," Lieutenant Carter called her to his office, where U.S. Department of Agriculture officials waited. "We're planning agricultural education for post-war Germany. They want your insights on American corn farming and its adaptability to German conditions." The 3-hour meeting saw Ingrid detail her learnings: corn varieties, farming techniques, and cultural attitudes valuing corn over dismissing it. The officials noted German soil, climate, and infrastructure details. "The challenge," said Dr. Ellis, the lead consultant, "is whether Germans will accept corn as legitimate food. We can introduce better varieties and teach methods, but cultural bias could doom it." "That bias is real," Ingrid confirmed. "I held it myself. Germans see corn as poverty food because we only know field corn, eaten when nothing else remains." "How do we change that view?" Dr. Ellis asked. Ingrid reflected on her journey from scorn to appreciation. "Let them taste it," she said, "not as a substitute for wheat or potatoes, but as a unique food with its own merits. Show them grilled sweet corn isn't inferior, it's different, and different isn't worse." The officials, pleased, took notes. "Would you join our post-war program, teaching German farmers corn cultivation and overcoming resistance?" The offer stunned Ingrid. Months ago, she'd fought America. Now they asked her to reshape German agriculture with captive learned knowledge. "Yes," she replied firmly. "Germany's recovery needs lessons from those who succeeded where we failed, even if they come in humble forms like corn." That evening, during a Thanksgiving event organized by American staff, Ingrid led a corn pudding demonstration for the holiday meal. The sweet dish, initially unthinkable as dessert, had gained popularity among prisoners. "My mother wouldn't believe this," Clara said, helping with ingredients. Her daughter, a Wehrmacht officer, teaching German women to cook American corn desserts in a prison camp. "Your mother wouldn't believe much about this captivity," Ingrid replied. "The decent quarters, ample food, respect shown, and yes, that corn can be delicious when approached right." Talk turned to post-war plans. Some prisoners chose to stay in America. Others, like Ingrid, planned to return with American knowledge, farming techniques, recipes, lessons from abundance, not propaganda. "Will Germans accept corn?" asked Marta, a former nurse captured at Anzio. "Will those who see it as animal feed eat it like Americans?" "Not right away," Ingrid admitted. "But as we rebuild, needing crops with high yields, Americans chose corn not for lack of European options, but for its agricultural strengths. Germans will eventually see that." December 1945 saw Germany's ruins and repatriation preparations. American officials launched an intensive agricultural program for returning prisoners to aid German farming's revival. Ingrid led corn cultivation classes, sharing Muller farm techniques with women soon to carry them home. "The key lesson," she told her students, "isn't just corn. It's approaching agriculture with openness, not prejudice. Germans assumed corn was inferior because we never refined it. Americans invested centuries in varieties worth eating, yielding abundance." Classes blended practical and cultural education. Prisoners learned to identify corn types, understand growing conditions, and see corn as a complement to German crops. They also absorbed America's agricultural philosophy, enabling such diversity. In Germany, Ingrid explained. We treat farming as a battle, wrestling the soil for yield. Americans see it as a partnership, developing varieties to maximize each crop's strengths. Greta, planning to return to her family's Bremen farm, was attentive. My father won't believe Americans eat corn as a delicacy, she said privately. He'll think I've been brainwashed. Don't tell him, Ingrid advised. Show him. Plant sweet corn, cook it well, and let him taste it. That's what changed me. Not claims of American superiority, but tasting delicious food. As repatriation neared, Ingrid received a U.S. Department of Agriculture offer, a consultancy in the American occupation zone, teaching crop diversification and modern methods, with American wages and Munich housing. You'd work for the occupiers, Clara noted. Some Germans will call that collaboration. Some will call anything collaboration, Ingrid replied. But Germany needs to learn from American success to recover. Bridging that gap, teaching that learning from former enemies isn't betrayal, is practical wisdom. The 2-week voyage home saw Ingrid and others strategizing to introduce American methods to skeptical German farmers. The sweet corn seeds from Mrs. Muller were packed with growing and cooking instructions. We're bringing enemy crops, Marta observed as Europe's coast appeared, carrying American corn to German soil. It's symbolic, Ingrid agreed. These seeds show American strength came from agricultural sophistication we never developed, from embracing crops we dismissed. The corn represents learning with open minds, not rigid biases. Docking in Hamburg, Ingrid saw a Germany scarred by defeat, ruined cities, shattered infrastructure, displaced millions. Yet she saw opportunity, a society forced to rebuild, perhaps ready to rethink old assumptions. The corn seeds symbolized that chance to turn a dismissed crop into abundance by recognizing different wasn't inferior. By March 1946, Ingrid stood in a Munich demonstration garden, set up by occupation authorities, before 50 farmers, mostly widows managing family lands. She explained sweet corn cultivation. This isn't the corn you know for. Livestock, she began, holding seeds resembling familiar field corn. These are sweet corn seeds, bred for human consumption, considered a delicacy in America when grown and cooked right. Frau Bauer, a Bavarian farmer, interrupted. We've grown corn for generations. It's for animals. Why believe American claims about special corn? Ingrid expected this. I thought the same a year ago, she said. As a Kansas prisoner, I learned their methods from farm families. What I teach is what I did. It's not propaganda. It's proven knowledge. The garden became a testing ground for challenging biases. Ingrid planted field corn, sweet corn, and popcorn side by side, letting farmers see differences in growth, kernels, and harvest timing. Sweet corn plants are smaller, she explained on a tour, but yield sweeter, tenderer kernels, harvested before sugars turn to starch. People eat this fresh? Asked Frau Klein, a widow farming her husband's land. Not milled or processed. Americans eat it off the cob, Ingrid confirmed. Grilled, boiled, roasted. It's celebration food for families. Try it before calling it animal feed. The July harvest was the test. Ingrid hosted an American-style corn roast in the garden, inviting farmers to taste sweet corn. As in Kansas, experience trumped argument. My heavens, Frau Klein exclaimed after a bite of buttered corn. This isn't the corn we feed pigs. It's a different variety, bred for different purposes. Ingrid said patiently. Americans didn't eat animal feed. They created corn worth eating. The garden's success drew notice from occupation and German officials. Within a year, Ingrid led experimental farms across the American zone, teaching thousands about crop diversification. You're a corn missionary, Lieutenant Colonel Davis, overseeing reconstruction, remarked. Converting skeptics through taste, not talk. I was a skeptic, Ingrid replied. I understand their resistance. Letting them taste the difference works better than telling them. By 1948, sweet corn spread across Western Germany, valued for high yields and short seasons beyond its culinary appeal. Germans didn't yet match American enthusiasm, but stopped seeing it as mere fodder. In 1955, a decade post-war, Ingrid stood in her Munich consultancy office, preparing for a meeting with officials planning Germany's agricultural future. Market stalls outside sold sweet corn beside traditional vegetables, unthinkable during her Wehrmacht days. Frau Bauer, her assistant, announced. The Agriculture Ministry delegation is here to discuss corn expansion to East Germany if reunification happens. Greeting officials, some former skeptics from her gardens, Ingrid reflected on her path from mocking prisoner to agricultural advocate. 10 years ago, she began. I was a Kansas captive, scoffing at Americans for eating corn I thought was animal feed. Today, I urge you to see corn as a cornerstone for German agriculture. This shift shows what Germany must learn about open-minded problem-solving. She presented plans for sweet corn, field corn, and specialty varieties, backed by a decade of German trials proving American methods worked in Europe. Initial resistance has faded, she said, showing rising corn consumption data. Farmers who shunned American corn now see its benefits. Cultural bias was overcome by experience. Post-meeting, Ingrid walked Munich's market, watching families buy corn for grilling, recalling her own shock at American roasts. Still think it's animal feed? Asked Mrs. Mueller, visiting to see programs her family inspired. I think, Ingrid replied, embracing her mentor, it's what you make it. Americans made it cuisine. Germans are learning to. That evening, her dinner blended German and American dishes. Sauerbraten with corn pudding, dumplings with grilled corn, schnitzel with succotash, reflecting her philosophy of honoring tradition while embracing new lessons. My mother thinks I'm brainwashed for cooking corn, Clara, now an agricultural specialist, said at the meal. In a way, they did. Ingrid laughed. They washed away my unexamined biases, made me taste what I mocked, and showed my assumptions about American inferiority were wrong. The corn was a perfect teacher, Ingrid toasted, raising her glass. Its simplicity exposed our flawed assumptions, forcing us to question what else we got wrong. To corn, Clara added, for teaching us to learn from former enemies. To sweet corn, Ingrid concluded, proof that what we dismissed was sophistication we never developed. A metaphor for what Germany needed to learn from its victors. As guests left, Ingrid gazed at Munich's lights on rebuilt buildings, aided by American techniques. In her kitchen, corn awaited breakfast, and in her heart, gratitude for the Muellers, who showed a skeptic that the sweetest lessons come from tasting what you once scorned. Corn was more than food, a bridge, a humility lesson, proof that strong societies develop what others dismiss. Each bite of sweet corn recalled that moment in Concordia when she thought, everything I believed about American food was wrong. What else was I wrong about? That question shaped a decade of rebuilding, helping renew a nation.